the woman who smuggled 2,500 children. Irena Sendler saved more lives than any other individual in World War II. The Gestapo broke her legs and arms. She never gave up a single name. Warsaw, 1942. Inside the ghetto walls, 500,000 Jewish men, women and children are dying, slowly, deliberately, by design. Outside those walls, a young Polish woman with a toolbox, a nurse's uniform, and a dog. Trained to bark at German soldiers is doing something that defies every rational instinct of self-preservation. She is walking in, and she is walking out with children hidden inside that toolbox. She will do this hundreds of times. And the names of every child she saves, she will bury in a glass jar under an apple tree in her neighbor's garden, just in case she doesn't make it out herself. The woman who chose to see. Irena Sendler was born in 1910 in Warsaw, Poland, into a family that taught her one lesson above all others. When people are suffering, you do not look away. Her father was a doctor who treated Jewish patients at a time when many Polish physicians refused to. He died of typhus when Irena was 7 years old, contracted from a patient he could have chosen not to treat. At his deathbed, he told her, "If you see someone drowning, you must jump in and save them, even if you cannot swim." She spent the rest of her life proving she had understood him perfectly. By 1939, Irena was a social worker in Warsaw. She was 29 years old when Germany invaded Poland and the world she knew collapsed in a matter of days. Within 2 years, the Germans had built a wall around a section of Warsaw and forced over 400,000 Jewish people inside, cramped, starving, dying of disease at a rate that was not accidental. It was policy. The Warsaw Ghetto was not a prison. It was a waiting room for something worse. Irena had a pass to enter the ghetto as part of her work with the Warsaw Social Welfare Department. Officially, she was there to check on sanitation and disease control. Unofficially, she was there because she could not sleep at night, knowing what was happening behind those walls and doing nothing about it. What she saw inside changed her completely. Families living 10 to a room. Children with distended bellies begging in the streets. Bodies left on sidewalks because there was nobody left to carry them. And above it all, a silence among the adults. The terrible knowing silence of people who understood exactly what was coming and had nowhere to run. The network. In 1942, Irena joined Ghetto, a secret Polish organization dedicated to saving Jewish lives. She became the head of its children's division, and she immediately understood something that nobody else had fully grasped. The only children who had any chance of surviving what was coming were the ones who got out of the ghetto before the deportations began. So she built a network. Quietly, carefully, at enormous personal risk, she recruited nurses, doctors, social workers, priests, and ordinary Warsaw families willing to hide a Jewish child in their home and claim it as their own. She forged documents, birth certificates, baptism records, identity papers, giving Jewish children new names, new histories, new lives. She trained her team to move children past German checkpoints, using methods that required a specific kind of cold nerve that most human beings simply do not possess. Children were hidden in toolboxes, wrapped in burlap sacks, placed in coffins beneath corpses, sedated and carried out in ambulances, hidden under the floorboards of trams. Irena's dog, trained specifically for this purpose, would bark loudly whenever German soldiers approached. Covering any sound a frightened child might make it exactly the wrong moment. The dog saved as many lives as any human member of the network. But before any child could leave, Irena faced the cruelest moment of the entire operation. She had to convince the parents to let go. Imagine being a mother in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1942. A young woman you have never met before comes to you and tells you that she can take your child to safety, but you cannot come. You will never know where your child is going. You may never see them again. You are being asked to hand your most precious thing in the world to a stranger, and trust that the world outside those walls is kinder than the one inside. Many parents said no. They could not bear the separation. Many of those children did not survive. The ones whose parents said yes, most of them did.
I was taught that if you see a person drowning, you must jump in and save them, even if you cannot swim yourself.
The glass jars. Irena understood something from the very beginning that showed a remarkable clarity of mind under impossible pressure. Every child she saved had parents, grandparents, a family name, a history, an identity that belonged to them and could not be replaced by a forged document. When the war ended, these children would need to know who they really were. So she kept records, the real name of every child, the false name they were living under, the address where they were hidden. She wrote everything in tiny handwriting on thin strips of paper and buried them inside glass jars beneath an apple tree in her neighbor's garden at 9 Lekarsk Street. 2,500 names hidden in the ground, waiting for a world that might never come. In October 1943, the Gestapo came for her. Someone had talked. Someone in the network, under unimaginable pressure, had given her name. The Gestapo arrested Irena Sendler at her home at 3 in the morning. They took her to the Pawiak prison, the most feared detention center in occupied Warsaw, where the Gestapo's methods of interrogation were not subtle. They broke her feet. They broke her legs. They broke her arms. Session after session, they demanded the same thing: the names of the children, the names of the families hiding them, the names of everyone in the network. Irena Sendler said nothing. Not one name, not one address, not one detail that could have led the Gestapo to a single child or a single person who had helped her save them. She was sentenced to death. The miracle and the aftermath. On the morning of her scheduled execution, something extraordinary happened. Ghetto, the organization she worked for, had bribed a German guard. Irena Sendler was taken from her cell, driven to the outskirts of Warsaw, and left by the side of a road. The official German records listed her as executed. She was alive. She spent the rest of the war in hiding, moving from address to address using false papers, continuing to coordinate the network from the shadows as best she could, despite her injuries. The legs that the Gestapo had broken healed improperly. She walked with pain for the rest of her life. When the war ended, Irena Sendler dug up the glass jars. She took the names to the Central Committee of Polish Jews and began the agonizing process of trying to reunite children with their families. Most of the parents were dead, killed in Treblinka, in Auschwitz, in the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. The children Irena had saved were, in many cases, the last survivors of their entire families. The new names on the forged documents were all they had left of who they used to be. The names in the jars gave them back the rest. She saved 2,500 children. One of the most extraordinary individual rescue operations in the history of World War II.
I could have done more. This thought has been haunting me for over 60 years.
Irena Sendler was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. She did not win. She was 97 years old when she found out. She died the following year, in 2008, at 98 years old. For decades after the war, her story was almost completely unknown outside of Poland. The communist government that ruled the country after the war had little interest in celebrating the heroism of someone associated with non-communist resistance. She lived quietly, in modest circumstances, largely forgotten by the world she had risked everything to save. It was a group of American high school students from Kansas, of all places, who brought her story back to the world. In 1999, for teenagers, researching a history project stumbled across a brief mention of Irena Sendler and assumed it must be an error. Nobody saves 2,500 children. Nobody withstands that kind of torture without breaking. They wrote a short play about her life called Life in a Jar. They performed it in their school gymnasium, then in churches, community centers, and eventually theaters across the United States and Europe. Irena Sendler, then in her 90s, watched a performance of the play about her own life and wept. She had spent 60 years believing the world had forgotten. It hadn't. It just needed someone to remind it. 2,500 children, hidden in toolboxes, buried in glass jars, carried through checkpoints by a woman with a dog and a nurse's uniform. And a courage so absolute it is almost impossible to comprehend. Every one of those children became a person, had children of their own, had grandchildren. The estimates of their descendants today run into the tens of thousands. Irena Sendler jumped into the water. She couldn't save everyone, but she saved everyone she could. If this story stayed with you, and I think it will, there are many more waiting. Stories that history forgot or chose to ignore. Subscribe, and I'll bring you one every week. And if you know someone who would have stayed until the end of this video, send it to them. That's how these stories survive.